You visited Sri Lanka 2 years after invitation was extended by the government. Why did you wait until a resolution was passed at the UNHRC sessions in 2013 to accept this invitation, Madam High Commissioner?
Firstly, I accepted the invitation. I was very pleased with it. It was welcomed in the Human Rights Council because it showed some openness on the part of the government to invite the High Commissioner for Human Rights. It was fixing of the date, which we thought mutually, that is, with the minister concerned who came to Geneva, that it would be proper for me to come after the LLRC issues its report and is given some opportunity to implement some of this. So that's much better that I come and then report on what actions have been taken. So that was mutually agreed, and thereafter, since we do not have an office here in Sri Lanka, I asked whether I could send a mission. The government readily accepted that. So I waited for those two steps. And of course, in the meantime, I do have heavy responsibilities in responding to invitations from many other parts of the world. I needed the time as well. So I'm very happy, really, that this visit materialized and that the government received me in a very good spirit.
When you look at the last few years, Madam High Commissioner, you see the manner in which many HR violations, human rights violations have been carried out in Afghanistan, Iraq, drone attacks in Pakistan, and so on and so forth. However, the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights has not really voiced their concerns over these issues. If you really look at it, what is the reason behind this? Why a policy for the developing world and why another policy for the Western world? Is that so?
You know, that is entirely incorrect. There really is an onus on the media to make clear to all listeners and viewers that the United Nations focuses on every country, developed or developing. If you take the Universal Periodic Review, this is something that if you had asked me would it come about 5 years ago, I would have said I can't see it happening. And that is that states voluntarily agreed to a system of review by other governments of their human rights record. And every one of the 193 countries were reviewed in the first 4 years. It's now the second cycle. Sri Lanka then has been reviewed in the first cycle and the second cycle.
In 2012.
And then, let me just complete. So the recommendations are made in terms of fixed criteria by all other states. And developed countries receive as many, if not more, recommendations than developing countries. So it's not a focus only on developing countries.
Madam High Commissioner, in 2012, in April, United States soldiers sprayed in Afghanistan, killing nearly 12 civilians. However, following this incident that took place in Afghanistan, there has not been any substantial report or condemnation coming from the United Nations itself. That is what I'm referring to at this point of time.
Yes, let me say these matters have been addressed by the independent experts. They've filed reports, they've investigated, filed reports and produced them before the General Assembly and Human Rights Council. The government of the United States has held very many trials of soldiers who suspected of violating US laws and international laws. So there I see that institutions, judicial institutions have come in to address serious violations, such as some of the incidents that occurred in Bagram prison in Afghanistan.
One of the allegations leveled at the United Nations is the fact that the UN is taking a very reactive approach and not a proactive one. We see this from the comments made by William Hague recently over Syria. He said that the UN is silent and more has to be done in Syria. What is the reason behind this, Madam High Commissioner? Do you think that the structure in which the UN operates has to change?
First, let me say I raise a strong voice in favor of looking at prevention of violations rather than waiting for them to happen. Really, that's the best way to protect people. Syria, that you just raised with me, is a good example. In my first statement before the Security Council, said, and this is what was happening at that point, that protesters were on the street asking for their legitimate human rights, their civil and political, economic and social rights. They being fired upon, and I appealed to the Security Council to take action. So unfortunately the situation has grown into full-blown conflict, even sectarian violence, and the Security Council has been unable to act collectively to save civilian lives in Syria.
Wrapping up your visit today in Sri Lanka, what is the message you have for the government?
I encourage the government to do more. I acknowledge that they've done a great deal, and I encourage other governments to help support Sri Lanka's initiatives. But I urge them to make genuine, serious attempts at addressing all human rights holistically, to ensure the protection of every Sri Lankan, to ensure that there isn't religious conflict, for instance. The responsibility of the government is to protect all, particularly in a country where there are many languages, many religions. I point to the tolerance that used to be in the norm in Sri Lanka many years back.
Given your experience, how long will it take for Sri Lanka to achieve reconciliation?
Well, I can't predict that. People have said to me that some of the LLRC recommendations can be moved and advanced fast. I'm just asking them to do much more and do them as soon as possible.
What are you taking back home? What are you taking back to Geneva from this experience, Madam High Commissioner?
Well, I've not been able to address all my human rights concern in this short visit. I will continue to do so. I take back with me a will on the part of the government to address the matter, although I am concerned that democracy is being has been eroded somewhat from some of the good institutions that were here before. I think they should be restored. There should be less executive control. The ministries should have a greater say in some good programs that they are developing. So bottom line, this is an ongoing cooperation between my office and the government of Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Madam High Commissioner, for joining us right here on News First.
Thank you.
தனது விஜயத்தை நிறைவு செய்து கொண்ட ஐக்கிய நாடுகளின் மனிதுரிமைகள் ஆணையாளர் நவநீதம் பிள்ளை நியூஸ் ஃபர்ஸ்டுக்கு விசேட செவ்வியொன்றை வழங்க முன்னர் கொழும்பில் செய்தியாளர் சந்திப்பொன்றிலும் கலந்து கொண்டார்.
It is important everyone recognizes that although the fighting is over, the suffering is not. Wounds will not heal and reconciliation will not happen without respect for those who grieve. Physical reconstruction alone will not bring reconciliation, dignity, or lasting peace. Clearly, a more holistic approach is needed to provide truth, justice, and reparation for people's suffering during the war. There are a number of specific factors impeding normalization, which, if not quickly rectified, may sow the seeds of future discord. These are by and large to do with the curtailment or denial of personal freedoms and human rights, or linked to persistent impunity and the failure of rule of law. I also requested more information about the courts of inquiry appointed by the army to further investigate the allegations of civilian casualties and summary executions, and suggested that appointing the army to investigate itself does not inspire confidence in a country where so many past investigations and commissions of inquiry have foundered one way or another. Unless there is a credible national process, calls for an international inquiry are likely to continue. I would now like to turn to a disturbing aspect of the visit, namely the harassment and intimidation of a number of human rights defenders, at least 2 priests, journalists, and many ordinary citizens who met with me or planned to meet with me. This type of surveillance and harassment appears to be getting worse in Sri Lanka, which is a country where critical voices are quite often attacked or even permanently silenced. Utterly unacceptable. At any time, it is particularly extraordinary for such treatment to be meted out during a visit by a UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. The war may have ended, but in the meantime, democracy has been undermined and the rule of law eroded. I am deeply concerned that Sri Lanka, despite the opportunity provided by the end of the war to construct a new, vibrant, all-embracing state, is showing signs of heading in an increasingly authoritarian direction.
ஐக்கிய நாடுகளின் மனிதுரிமைகள் ஆணையாளர் இம்மாத இறுதியில் மனிதுரிமை பேரவையில் இலங்கை தொடர்பில் விடயங்களை எடுத்துக் கூறவுள்ளதுடன் அடுத்த ஆண்டு மார்ச் மாதம் இலங்கை தொடர்பில் மனிதுரிமை பேரவையில் அறிக்கையொன்றையும் சமர்ப்பிக்க உள்ளார்.